Hey everyone. I am welcome to the Data Rules podcast. I'm Victor Dwyer, and today's episode we are going to talk about optimizing LinkedIn ads, plus how to attribute your LinkedIn ads to your CRM data. It is basically understanding the building within your performance within the LinkedIn ads dashboard. It's all about B2B marketing with LinkedIn ads right here, right now on the Data Rules podcast. Anthony, thank you so much for joining today. Anthony's going to give us a little introduction about who he is, what he does, and things like that, and really build off of that. And then we'll get started right in the conversation. So, Anthony, thank you so much for coming on today.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm head of ads at Speedwork. We're a B2B marketing agency, and we specialize in working on LinkedIn. So all of our work is all in the B2B space, and then a lot of it tends to be software and tech, and then professional services. I'd say are like the most common ones. But we help with campaign creation and campaign management. Usually the client's goals are lead generation. So we specialize in doing LinkedIn ad campaigns and helping clients with lead generation.
Yeah, that's great. And like we all know about how expensive LinkedIn ads are because we are all benefited off of like the Facebook ads, that like how cheap they are and everything else. So can you go into like why LinkedIn ads are so much more expensive than every other ad platform out there? Because it's the biggest conversation. It's like, oh, LinkedIn ads, oh snap, that's expensive. So like, can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So I totally agree. LinkedIn ads is definitely a more expensive platform than most. I've done plenty of Facebook ads back in the day, and like whenever you can see like dollar clicks or like there's plenty of people that talk about like dollar leads and stuff like that. That all sounds great. So in comparison, LinkedIn ads is a lot more expensive, and it kind of starts with LinkedIn does set a floor on their CPC bids that are a lot higher than most other platforms. So you kind of start there in your bidding process. And then LinkedIn ads is an auction. So it does depend on how competitive your audience is and who else is bidding on that audience. So LinkedIn knows they have a pretty niche, pretty high value audience in being professionals, upper level professionals at companies. So they know they have this high value audience and they're going to charge you a lot to use it. When it kind of shakes out, if you're the type of company that needs to target these type of people and you have a high enough LTV for your customer, then at the end of the day, then that's when LinkedIn is going to be a better channel for you versus like Facebook. Mm-hmm. If you're just targeting all professionals or all business owners out there, then maybe Facebook does get you better prices in the end. But when you need to target that niche professional at scale, like that's when LinkedIn's going to be useful. And it's like when you start comparing metrics side by side, where if like 9 out of 10 of your Facebook leads are not good and you're paying really 10 times what you think you're paying versus on LinkedIn, if you can specifically target who's that niche professional, that's when your metrics are usually going to work out in your favor on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and that's why also like breaking it out like based off the data is like so vital. Like it's like one of the most important thing because on Facebook you can kind of let the algorithm do its thing, but it's really important like to really see the data behind it because it is so much more expensive, LinkedIn is, that it's really important to make sure you're making that data-driven decisions because if you don't, you're really going to see it hurt you if you don't because it's going to be you have to be making sure you're always strategizing on the next thing to do because you can't just like keep it running because of how expensive it really is.
Right. And mistakes are a lot more expensive on LinkedIn if they're made.
Yeah, exactly. So can you go into, if any, how you would make a data-driven decision based off like maybe you break it out by audience or certain maybe you break it out by custom audience, lookalike audience. Yeah. How do you really break out your campaigns to make some of those data layer decisions? Or maybe you do it on the ad level. Maybe you see like, okay, maybe this ad level works. Can you go into like how you make those decisions there?
Yeah. So targeting can kind of be an art and a science sometimes. And I think there's a few factors involved in that. Number one depends on purely who you're targeting and what you want to test, I'd say. So if there's like certain variables you want to split test, then you would separate those out on a campaign level. And then I'd say pretty common is targeting by like a persona. So organizing your targeting and your audience based on who are the different personas I want to target. And then it's kind of a factor on how much budget do I have.
Yeah.
Budget can play a factor in terms of like how segmented should I get, and the more segmented you are, the more you're going to spread out your data across your campaigns. And that's number one that you have to analyze, roll back up to analyze, or that the algorithm is going to have to optimize over. So if you spread it out too much, especially on LinkedIn being a more expensive platform, you might water down your data and then it's harder to read. And then the algorithm doesn't have enough to kind of play with there. So because of that, targeting can kind of be an art and a science. You probably want most people, and our approach is typically surrounding personas, and then it's depending on how much budget there is, how granular we want to get in our different campaigns, so that we can split test them. This is the Power My Analytics podcast, and we're a heavy user of Power My Analytics, and I'll acknowledge like it's a great tool to be able to pull your data back out of LinkedIn to analyze it, and then make some of those data-driven decisions like that to analyze how it's performing. Because the granularity of your campaigns, sometimes you're going to put more inside a campaign, and then you have a bunch of different variables inside a campaign. You need to then go back into that and see how those different variables are performing, so that you can understand, maybe I need to drop one of these targeting categories and make a decision based off that. LinkedIn itself gives you a surprisingly little amount of data in their ads manager. So tools like PMA are great because you can then pull that data back out, put it into a dashboard or a sheet, analyze it yourself to see some of those breakdowns and get more specifics that you might not have originally had.
See, the biggest thing for me is the Google Sheet functionality, because I like to manipulate the data my certain way, and basically going off of that. So I might have one Google Sheet tab of just the description headlines and seeing, okay, what is the performance on this description headline, and see the performance there. And then I might see, okay, for the bottom headline, for the call to action, what's the performance on each particular call to action? What's the performance on each particular ad graphic? What's the performance on each particular ad format? So if it's image, video, text, like what is the top format there? And I aggregate the data in a certain way every single time that you can get with Google Data Studio, but I like to manipulate it like with VLOOKUPs and things like that and that nature. And I like to have that extra granularity that you normally don't get in Google Data Studio as well. So I really love the Google Sheet functionality to really play around and aggregate the data a certain way to like see, okay, what format is working, what text is working, like, and everything else, and really take a deeper dive in that, because then I can start making more of those database decisions to kind of go from there. It really helps out.
You must be a formula guy.
Yeah, I'm definitely a VLOOKUP formula guy, but like I'm not as math brained as you may think. I do have a lot like the art part of it. I'm not like total developer person, but I really enjoy that part.
Yeah.
So I'm able to aggregate data in a certain way, which makes me, yes, a formula guy, but I'm not a Java guy. Yeah, so I'm a formula guy, but not a Java guy. I'm not that far into it. But yes, I definitely am a formula guy.
Yeah, I think like knowing enough to be dangerous in Google Sheets is like a very powerful skill. When like,
It is.
and I think like probably like the first time I go to sit down to like analyze something, sometimes it's most useful to pull it out in a sheet, because you can just like see the numbers and see the data there, figure out how you want to analyze it, what you want to do, and then maybe you then build that into a dashboard in Google Data Studio, so that it's just kind of self-updating at that point. But yeah, I do like breaking out the spreadsheet to just make sure I'm seeing everything the right way. The trade-off of Google Data Studio is like it can make it polished, but there's a lot you don't see there. So sometimes you want to like cross-check your numbers just to make sure they're right, and then pulling out into the sheet the way to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And like, yes, I am more developer on that side. I'd rather see everything in a Google Sheet. But if I was presenting it to a client or something, I definitely want to use Google Data Studio, because like usually the clients just want to see surface level. Are we growing or are we falling? And I just show that within Google Data Studio to make it all pretty and everything else. And then I do everything on the back end to make sure like to see all the data aggregating a certain way and things like that. Is really important. So yeah.
Is the chart going up and to the right? All right, we're good.
like usually people say, Victor, it looks good. That's really all I get. But going into some of the demographic, some in-depth demographic optimizations. What are some of the ways that you target demographics? So you talked a little bit about like the titles targeting. You can target titles within LinkedIn ads, which is this big benefit off of it. What are some more demographics, and how do you optimize for those?
Yeah, good question. So I'd say the most common is, number one is like job title on LinkedIn. I'd say that's like the most clear thing that you're going to optimize towards. Where depends on the audience, but depends on how you're formulating the audiences to start. If you're starting more function and seniority based, then you might make your optimizations based off that. If you're starting with job title targeting, then you'd make your optimizations based off that. But I'd say most common is you're going to have one of those two. You'll have your industries, your company sizes, probably your locations as well.
Yeah.
And then as a campaign runs, you kind of break that all back out. And if you're in LinkedIn's campaign manager, it'll show you some stats in terms of like impressions, clicks, and then like some like leads and conversions, but not all of them. And like some of them will say too low to report on. But if you export that or get it through Google Power My Analytics, then you can see those actual numbers and see those actual breakdowns. So that's when you'll start to like look at a campaign and say, and it kind of depends, like every campaign might be different, where certain ones you might see a job title stick out as being a low performer or a top performer, and know that I would need to exclude that, or maybe I just need to just focus on that job title if that's the one that's converting. So being able to see that granularity of performance is like super useful. And like I said, it depends on the campaign, where sometimes you might see it's all big companies that are converting no matter the job title. Then maybe you can make an optimization based off that. Maybe it's like the industry, let's say maybe all marketing and advertising companies are converting, but none of the healthcare ones are, and like being able to see that breakdown. So I like to get that all into a dashboard or a Google Sheet and like just kind of break it all down. I'd say I've kind of set up several different dashboards, and I like the different heat maps that Google Data Studio can do. So I can kind of scan down a list of either a list of campaigns or like a list of all these different demographic breakdowns, and just have those heat maps kind of call out to me which ones are the top performers or which ones are the lowest performers. Because when you have enough data on a page, sometimes you kind of get lost in the numbers there. So when you can organize that and color code it, then it looks pretty too.
Yeah, and like there's so much value out about making an actual engaging, actionable dashboard, because you can put a million numbers on a dashboard. I say this all the time. Like you can put a million numbers on a dashboard, but you have to make it actionable and actually engaging. That's when that's when the art piece comes into play. Like I'm not total back-end developer. I'm also an artist when it comes to like you do have to use different colors. Like you can't use like all the same color on the dashboard. It won't make it engaging. Your eye is going to do this scanning thing. You can see just analyzing your eye and what it does. You can see how it scans through a dashboard. And if your eye is just going straight like this to the bottom, you're not having a good dashboard. Your eye is supposed to go like this. Okay, look at the KPIs on top. Okay, now it's going to go to another chart. Now it's looking there. Okay, now it's going to go there. And you have to analyze, making sure your eye is actually engaging with it. And now you have an engaging dashboard you're actually going to look at, rather than just doing this. Because if any client or customer is doing that, your dashboard sucks. Like it's just how it is. So you have to make it actually engaging, and by also incorporating colors, incorporating different charts and things like that. Because if you have just a bunch of tables with numbers, no one's going to look at it. It's just too many numbers for the brain to understand, really. So, when you are creating your dashboard, is there any, so you said you use different colors and things like that. Is there any other way you incorporate things to make it like very helpful? Or like what KPIs on LinkedIn do you use? Is it different from another KPI from another platform? How do you incorporate your dashboard on LinkedIn?
Yeah, good question. So things, what I've kind of actually realized, I was actually just thinking about this last week, is things that are like increments of like impressions, like you have one impression or you have two impressions, stuff like that. I look at more with those bars that are in a chart. So you can just have like a set of rows of your different campaigns or your different demographics. And I can see, okay, lots of impressions or little impressions. And then things that are more of like a calculation or a value, I'll do more heat maps for that. So cost per lead or conversion rates will typically be like a heat map. So I can see, what's the top percentile of cost per lead and what's the bottom percentile of cost per lead. And then things that are like incremental, like impressions or clicks or just pure leads, those would be like a bar that I'll put in there. And I find like my brain digests that the best in that format.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll do for those. I'd say those are the main two things. What I wish Google's Data Studio could do that I like that I can do in a Google Sheet is these things called spark lines, which are like a little chart that's in the actual cell. For whatever reason, last time I checked, Google Data Studio cannot do that. So what I would like is even like LinkedIn Campaign Manager can do this. If you just have like the performance view in LinkedIn Ads, they have like a little chart and like, okay, this campaign had 5 leads and then it went back down to 0, or this, there's just one day that it went down to no leads and then it went back up. To have like a little chart like that would be nice. So I have some Google Sheets that I'll do, and I'll put together a whole bunch of different things like that that'll color code cells. I guess, kind of get into some more things is like when I do it in Google Sheets, there's a lot of conditional formatting you can do in Google Sheets, which is nice.
True.
So that like I can pull all this data out with Power My Analytics and then set up all these different conditional formattings to say, did I overspend or underspend on this day by more than a certain amount, so that I need to like this is something I need to go take a look at. Like, why did this account overspend by more than a certain amount on a certain day? And then do those different heat maps. So I might see along the whole row of accounts or the whole row of campaigns that this campaign was the best or this one was the worst. And then I do program in some benchmarks too to say like if it's over this much cost per lead, then this campaign probably needs maybe new ads refreshed, or if click-through rate drops below a certain threshold, then I know it's going to call that out to me, and I'll know that go take a look. Maybe ads need to be refreshed there.
Yeah, and color coding is really powerful. Like I may be like a very like developer numbers guy, but like color coding it makes it where, okay, I need to look at this and do something next.
Yeah.
And just like you said, like if a cost per lead goes over a certain amount, then you have something actionable. You're saying, okay, I need to get more ad creative. I need to do something. But you're looking at a number, at a data point, and saying, okay, now this means I need to do this. And that is like very powerful, because if you were just like using the LinkedIn Ads Manager or whatever, anything else, getting that type of analysis and data aggregation is very, very difficult, especially with limited dashboards and things like that. And it makes it where you want to make it as actionable as possible. So that way you analyze something, you say, okay, this means I need to do that. And like making those decisions like the fastest makes it where you're able to be an effective marketer. Because if you're not looking at the data, you're not an effective marketer. If you're just basically guessing, you're saying, okay, I guess this is how it's work. But we all know every market's different. Every niche is different. Like there's so many factors. And if you're not looking at the data and how it's performing, you're not becoming an effective marketer. You're just letting the algorithm do everything. And you can't rely on the algorithm to do all the work for you. It's not like that.
And I've noticed even for myself too, as I've developed some of these, that like the more I use it, the more I know what I want to look at. And like I've had a couple that I've developed over the last year or so that I've just like added in more and more indicators for certain things, and then try to like for present values, I'll have in full color, but then like past values, I'll lighten those values so my eye doesn't jump to them as fast. So like little things like that just help you like save time, because I only, I know I can just glance at it and see present values and then look back and see past values, but present values are most important. But if I need to look back to past values, they're right there, but it's not going to draw my eye away and distract me. So yeah, if you're building dashboards, that doesn't hurt to have like a designer give some input on things, because the more efficient you are and the better story that your dashboard tells, the more effective marketer you're going to be.
Yeah. And also percent of change.
Yeah.
I really didn't think that how valuable that was, seeing like, okay, like this is your historical performance. Like let's say it was $50 a lead before and now it's 150. Like seeing the historical data, it makes it where you question it a little bit more. So like you say like, okay, I have historically having good performance and now I'm not. And then he's saying like, okay, what changed? Like, did I increase spend? Is the ad creative? Is the frequency going up? And like having historical data in there has been very valuable for me too, seeing the percent change and seeing like, okay, when we increase spend by this much, we see the cost per lead go up this much. Like in the percent change has been very valuable to me as a marketer, seeing like, okay, what is going up? What is going down? And rather than just seeing the static number of like, this is how many sales, and seeing like, okay, what percent of change happened on those sales. And then you can see if you have a 90% drop all of a sudden, you're going, oh, like that, something needs to happen. If you have a 90% drop in anything, something needs to happen. And I didn't realize how valuable that was. And I've started to incorporate that everywhere I can, percent of change versus the prior period. That's been very powerful for me. And that's been making a lot of changes.
Like that gives you context around your data because sure, present value can be good or bad, but in the context of the whole ad account or like the whole history of it, you might have a great account that has a bad number, but it's still a good number overall. But, you know, you got to call that out, that it's like, you know, why is it dropping off? Or maybe an account that just is, for whatever reason, maybe it's a very expensive audience or maybe a tough sell and like their cost per conversion is usually a lot higher, but maybe one day it's good, but it's still high compared to others. You have to have that context around it. So yeah, when you can do that automatically with Google Data Studio, they do some nice percent change calculations. And then also like percent of total, I know I use a lot. So like, okay, this campaign's driving 73% of leads. Sometimes you can just glance at that and notice, but if you have enough campaigns, then having a percentage there to like tell you that is useful.
Yeah, 100%. And really going into the kind of pivoting to the challenges and solutions with starting LinkedIn ads, what are some pitfalls or like what are some things I know I've set up a LinkedIn ads myself, and the thing I will say is the most annoying thing is I come from a Facebook ad background where you can put a video, image, and carousel all in one campaign and one ad set. And LinkedIn, I went to go create it and I was like, I have to create a campaign for every ad format I have to create a campaign for every image I use, a campaign for every video I use, and a campaign for every. I was like, who designed this? Like who actually does that? And so that was one of the things that when I went on LinkedIn, I was like, wow, that is horrible. I don't know who invented that. I even called out LinkedIn. I was like, I made a post like, LinkedIn, I don't know why you did this. You guys need to fix that because that is horrible. But yes, when creating LinkedIn ad campaigns, is there anything that you like provide, any challenges, solutions to really starting out with LinkedIn ads?
Yeah, so there's a few different things. And before I dive in, I'll say LinkedIn ads, there's like several things like that like Facebook's had for years. And you're like, wait, you can't do that on LinkedIn? Like, why does that not work like that? And like some of them are small, some of them are kind of big, but it is funny to compare and contrast the two. That feature there, I remember like a year or two ago, they said like that was coming soon, that you could mix ad types in a campaign. We haven't seen it yet. So, and I haven't heard in the most recent roadmap that like they didn't talk about it at all. So, you know, who knows? I will say LinkedIn has been like, so I do rip up, you know, we all make fun of LinkedIn's a little bit compared to Facebook, but like they have made a lot of updates recently. So there's been a whole UI change. There's been several new features that have come out recently. And like, I know several that are coming down the pipeline. I remember when they got acquired by Microsoft, at first it was like, all right, great. There's gonna be all this new stuff coming out, and then like there was just nothing for a long time. And then you're like, what are you doing over there? My hunch is maybe they've been developing stuff under the covers and like the back end of things, and now we're starting to see some of those features come out. So there's been several recent features that have been released, and like new ones I know are coming down the pipeline that I'm very excited for. Some of them it's like about time, but also some of them it's like, all right, this will be good to use. So most people are in the spot that you're in, that I talk to, that are like, okay, we did Facebook and this is what we did. Let's just like move that over to LinkedIn, or like, let's start with that on LinkedIn. Yeah. You don't just want to port your campaign over. There's several different things you want to think about a little bit differently. And first is, I probably say the targeting, where on Facebook, you give it, what you do usually is like give it a big audience or a sizable audience, and you let the AI go optimize for you. So you just give it, you know, I think 1 million people or something like that. It's like best practice. So you want a big audience, let the AI go find the right person for you. On LinkedIn, for better or worse, we don't rely on the AI nearly as much. And it's also because we have some pretty specific targeting options on LinkedIn that you almost don't want to leave it up to the AI's chance to go spend on other people. Because LinkedIn isn't a more expensive platform. Like, I know if I have job title targeting, I want to make sure I'm just reaching the right person that I want, not letting the algorithm go spend $10 per click on a person that I don't really want to target. So on one end, I know I want to be specific on things. And then on the other, like, you know, sure, Facebook does have a lot of data out there, and LinkedIn, you know, just a smaller platform, so not that it doesn't have as much data as Facebook does to use the AI. So what you do on LinkedIn is you give it a very specific audience. So on Facebook, you give it a big one, you let the AI go optimize for you. On LinkedIn, you want to be very specific on who it is you want to target so that you're not wasting any money on anybody who you don't want to target and who's not going to be interested in what you're serving. So that's number one is the targeting. Number two is the bidding. On Facebook, you're pretty much always paying per impression. On LinkedIn, they're going to give you that setting to start, but usually you want to switch that over to manual bidding and do your own bidding there. On LinkedIn, their maximum delivery is going to go spend your budget the whole day, whether people click or not. So typically is beneficial to start cost per click. And then depending on how your campaign is doing, maybe you would switch to that maximum delivery if it's doing really well. So targeting, bidding, and then I'd say third is like just creative and like what you're going to put into your ads.
Yeah.
Facebook, because you're usually paying for every impression, ads tend to be very curiosity invoking or like attention grabbing and like try to draw you in to watch the video or to click and to kind of like draw your traffic in that way. Whereas on LinkedIn, again, because it's very expensive, I don't want anybody to click on my ad who doesn't actually want what I'm selling. So I don't want to be vague. I don't want to be curiosity invoking. I want to be very direct as to what I'm offering and who I'm talking to. So it's good to call out who's your audience, who are you specifically talking to, and then what are you offering, and don't leave anything up to chance there, or else you'll have unintentional clicks that you're paying for. And if you're paying $10 per unintentional click, you're going to blow a lot of money very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to attribution for LinkedIn ads, so we know the iOS 14 update really killed Facebook for like, not entirely killed. There's still some success there, but it's still not as good as it was before the iOS 14 update. So how are you attributing sales to your CRM data to like fix everything that happened on the iOS 14 update to help reattribute sales on LinkedIn?
Yeah, good question. So I'd say LinkedIn's probably the least affected platform out of all of them. Sure, everyone is affected in terms of not being able to track conversions as closely or like obviously activity off the platform. But in terms of like working it back into how LinkedIn works, LinkedIn's mostly first party data in terms of like I'm targeting by job title that someone is putting in there. I'm targeting by industry that somebody's putting in there. I'm not targeting by any criteria means that isn't first party data on LinkedIn for the most part. There are some interests, but for the most part, it's mostly first party data. Whereas on Facebook, you're choosing these vague interests, and Facebook's building their AI models based on what people are doing off the platform. So they lost all that data. So that's what's really limiting their AI's abilities. Whereas on LinkedIn, a lot of that hasn't changed. So on LinkedIn, we use lead forms pretty heavily. So you're going to capture, what's that person's contact info, what's their email, what's their profile URL, kind of whatever you want to use as your inputs. You can use email as an identifier, you can use profile as an identifier, or however you want to handle that. But once that's in your CRM, that came from LinkedIn. And even if you're not using lead forms, you can separate out your landing pages so that you have each campaign or each ad is going to a specific landing page, and you'll code those forms, those landing pages appropriately so that as they get into your CRM, you can attribute all that kind of back. So there's get to be a lot of like variables and configurations there, but it's all possible to do. So what you do is you connect, that lead that you're capturing, that's going to go into your CRM, and you should have some attribution in terms of where that lead came from, either in terms of the form they came from or the campaign they came from. And then in your CRM, as that person works their way through the sales process, you can then track your cost per qualified lead, your cost per opportunity, your cost per sale back to where that lead initially came from. Some of them are nicer to work with. HubSpot's pretty nice, where they do a very good job of putting that all into like a couple dashboards that you can use. But the bigger the organization, the more likely that they probably have Salesforce for their sales team. And we do see this a lot where like the marketing team uses HubSpot and then the sales team uses Salesforce, and you try to, correlate all that data. So you kind of just need a couple more connectors there, and then attribute those leads as to where they came from, and then you can do that calculation. But that's basically how you do it. Is you need to track down where that lead came from on LinkedIn, and then be able to have some keys there in terms of who that person is and where they came from, and then in your CRM where they're making it to, and then pull all that data back out into a Google Sheet or a dashboard. And yeah, it's nice if you can, it's nice if you can pull that all into some sheets and then put some dashboards on it and like just have those update every day or multiple times per day. And then you can have these live metrics in your dashboards that are updating based on campaign performance.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the benefits off of it too is like using that lead gen form. That's your conversion tracking, and that's all on the LinkedIn platform as well. Whereas Facebook is more off traffic, more like on site traffic conversion tracking,
Yeah.
which is a little bit different because you have to work off of pixels, server side tracking, and everything else there. So I bet LinkedIn was affected on the conversion tracking on the on website side, but it sounds like you use more LinkedIn lead gen forms anyway. So it makes it where it wasn't as affected because it uses lead gen forms that are just on the LinkedIn site itself, which is first party data. So it really didn't matter since you're not doing that on website tracking conversion value, which you would have with Facebook, basically all on the website stuff. So it sounds like it wasn't as affected there, right?
Yeah. And we're seeing all the ad platforms try to hold as much traffic or do as much on their platform so they can track it versus going off platform. So most of them have lead forms these days. And yeah, when you can do that, then you know a conversion is a conversion and you're not leaving anything up to guessing.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting. And when it comes to best practices on offers, so we know that offers are like extremely important when it comes to advertising. And like with it, when I go through my LinkedIn feed, I get like everyone's an ebook. Like I swear I get like 20 ebook offers. So I want to get your thoughts about what are some best strategies on offers on LinkedIn that you see work as either a top of funnel strategy or bottom of funnel strategy, like saying like, hey, Victor, I would test 3 ebooks. I would test 3 offers, one being an ebook, one being a consultation. Like, what are kind of strategies you go with offers on LinkedIn?
That's a good question. So funnel strategy is definitely very important. And on LinkedIn, I think what happens in LinkedIn is like B2B offers are just more complex in terms of like a business service or a business product. It's typically a lot more complex than like Facebook is going to be, a lot of e-commerce stores. So go here, buy the shoe. Like there's not a ton you need to understand. Like a shoe's a shoe. Sure,
Yeah.
more of the design. You want to know what it's made out of. Maybe see some reviews, but for the most part, a shoe's a shoe. On LinkedIn, if you're purchasing software, maybe you need to think about integrations or what version they support and stuff like that. So B2B offers just tend to be more complex. So because of that, that's where we start thinking about this funnel. There's some great concepts out there, levels of market awareness in terms of like how mainstream is your brand and your product or service. If it's a new startup and a new technology you're building, people aren't going to be aware of that or really know much about it. So it's really difficult to go for the demo or consultation for something that people just don't understand yet. So that's where if people are not aware of it, you need to start more low level. So if it is a new piece of software, maybe say it's a marketing software, maybe it needs to be some kind of guide or checklist or an ebook, the top 5 problems with attribution in 2020. Something like that, or the top 5 solutions to solving iOS 14 in 2020. If you're a marketer actively working on doing better attribution, you're probably going to download that, play with the title and stuff. So it sounds appealing enough and valuable enough, and make sure it delivers on that. But that's why we often will start with ebooks and stuff for offers that are too complex. We've definitely done plenty of offers of like demos and even applications that will just do top of funnel if it's easily understood or as mainstream enough of a brand that people already trust them. So if you're a giant company like IBM, that might be a bad example. If you're a giant company like QuickBooks and you have like the QuickBooks software, most people have heard of QuickBooks. They've seen that logo somewhere. You can do a demo, probably top of funnel because it's well known enough. But if it was some new financial AI that no one's ever heard of before, I'm not going to go sign up for an AI that's going to analyze my financials if I don't trust it. So that's where you need to start with like a lower level offer of giving value first, or teaching them something to get their interest. And then the strategy comes down to how do you best align that so that you're hitting the right pain point or offering the right value so that it leads properly into your main offer. So there's a lot that goes into that. You're asking for best practices. I'd say most companies do start with building out their funnel in terms of start with that value offer. Most common, I'd say, are case studies and like checklists. And checklists, it's a quick and easy downloadable is what you want to do. However you want to package that into a checklist or whatever, that's the goal. Case studies are good because if someone's downloading the case study, they're interested in what that end result is that you're talking about in that case study. And if that's what your company offers, then it's aligned. So in that case study, obviously focus on what's that end result that you got your customer, and then package that into a case study. And then people who sign up for that are going to be interested in your services. So a lot of companies start with this as like a value offer, top of funnel, and then they'll retarget people with a more direct offer bottom of funnel.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. And I think it would be really important to make sure you just test multiple offers before, like, say, oh, LinkedIn ads don't work, or like any platform, any Facebook ad, or any advertising thing in general. Like, really test your offer and really test your creative first. There's a lot of things you have to get. You have to get your audience right, you have to get your creative right, and you have to get your offer right. There's 3 things that you have to get right within advertising to really make a successful advertising campaign. And offer is one of the most important things, because you can have a decent ad graphic, but an awesome offer that everyone's going to like love that. So it's really important to like communicate what your offer is doing and the reason why they need to download that ebook or get that case study or whatever it may be. So they say like, oh my gosh, I need that, and to incorporate it in there. When it comes to ad formats for creative on LinkedIn, I've heard some things. What are your thoughts on carousel ads versus image ads? What do you usually see works best on LinkedIn? Because I've seen both. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, most people start with image ads on LinkedIn, and a few reasons for that. A few technical reasons and a few just way people use LinkedIn. Number one, so image ads are kind of like the standard, simplest. You get an image and you get some copy.
Yeah.
On LinkedIn, like I said, you're usually paying per click there. So what we see is, like, say, video ads, people often click before they've watched the whole video and they really understand what that video is about. So kind of the flashier the video, the greater the chance that someone's going to click on it before they really know what they're clicking on. And then you might have wasted $10 on a click of somebody who doesn't really want what you're offering. So video ads are still great for retargeting or for top of funnel awareness, but we don't very often use them for lead capture because of that reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then carousel ads, again, they break down your image into multiple images. So somebody needs to take the time to look at all 3 images or more and all 3 headlines or more, and then understand what it is your ad's about. Whereas an image ad is just simple. You have an image and you have your headline, and then it's a much quicker conversion, or just more quicker consumption, that somebody can understand what you're advertising. And that's advertising. It's like, how do I convey a message to somebody? The more steps I have in that process, the more jumps that they got to go through, the less likely that they're going to make it perfectly the other way through. So that's where carousel ads and video ads just kind of have some more friction there. There are still good formats used in the right way, whereas it's a literal different visual format, so it's going to break up. If you have the same ads running always, then a carousel is a different format visually. Someone's going to see that differently and then maybe look at it or be like, okay, this is a different ad. You can kind of tell a story by scrolling through it. And then video ads, you can convey a lot of info in a video, but again, people might click before they really know what that video is about.
Yeah, 100%. And going back to your Facebook comment, you can't just take a Facebook ad to LinkedIn. That's very true. And you have to remember there's a different mindset between going on Facebook and then going on LinkedIn. So just for awareness about me, I don't read. I'm a video watcher, very visual. I don't read anything.
You were yelling at Google when I got on.
Yeah. Like I hardly ever read. But with that in mind, like I would go on like Facebook or like TikTok, like these other platforms. I might look at something like on TikTok. If something has more than 3 words on TikTok, I'm not reading it. Like,
Right.
but then when I'm on LinkedIn, I really like started to understand my mindset. I'm like, I'm reading. Like I'm reading like paragraphs and paragraphs, like on the latest Amazon stuff, the latest marketing stuff, and like on any other platform, like if I'm reading more than 3 words on TikTok, that's impressive. But if I read more than 120 words on LinkedIn, that's normal. So
Yeah.
I was really fascinated that when I'm on LinkedIn and scrolling, my mindset, same person, my mindset changes when I'm actually in the LinkedIn platform. And it's really important to apply that when it comes to, you can't just take a Facebook ad and put it on LinkedIn. Those are two separate platforms. And on Facebook, you might want to look at a video, something that's more visual and entertaining. But on LinkedIn, you might go for more information based type of things where you're going to be willing to read more. So that's really fascinating. You have to really understand the LinkedIn mindset when you enter the LinkedIn platform and really understand it, because people might be there for more information, news related stuff on LinkedIn. And really, you have to apply that same thing. So you might not take a video and put it on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And you have to change that format to really match that LinkedIn based audience and that LinkedIn mindset. And I just thought that was really fascinating. That was just a characteristic I picked on myself that
Yeah.
I just read more on LinkedIn naturally. And I thought that was really
I
interesting.
see the same thing too. And most people, the way that most people use LinkedIn, probably most common is to go research somebody they're about to have a meeting with. So they're going to hop on LinkedIn, go look up somebody they're about to meet with. I'm going to read their profile real quick and get off. Like that's how most people use LinkedIn. So you still need to capture their attention in that microsecond of opening LinkedIn and before they go to search or someone's profile. But people are checking LinkedIn. There is that opportunity to grab their attention, but they're not sitting there watching videos, scrolling around. And yeah, that is definitely comparing that with like Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, where you might be just looking at reels. And if you're looking at stories on Facebook or Instagram and like an image shows up, you're like, next.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I'm watching videos here. Like, I know they're more entertaining. So you're just like swipe off a picture if it's not a video because of that. So yeah, people on like Facebook and Instagram, they're usually there for like entertainment. So if it's not funny or if it's not grabbing my attention, then I'm going to the next one. But yeah, on LinkedIn, yeah, most people use like images, and then I think there's a lot more reading there. And I also think it's, the thought that when you're learning something and when something's like serious, you want to like read it because that's very tangible and like concrete in your mind. So you want to sit there and you want to like read something so you digest it and learn it. And like if it's about work or business, like those are pretty serious topics to most people. So they want to sit there and like make sure they understand something. So that's where like reading comes in instead of watching a video.
And it's a balance between being unique enough and being native to the platform. Like, for example, you don't want to like always put text or like always do the same image of what everyone else is doing. It's important to emulate their strategies, yes, but also with a twist on top of that. And test, like, even though we know that LinkedIn videos might not perform well, I still post a video once a week just in case of something that might change in there. That, like, for example, like there usually aren't that many videos on LinkedIn. So if I post a video, who knows, that LinkedIn audience may pick it up. So what I'm saying is there's strategies that we know that work, but it's still important to test the uniqueness factor to make it always test something that's different as well, because you never know what might outperform in the future. So don't always, for example, stick to images, stick to text or anything else. It's important to test those other variables because you never know what may outperform, to test that like uniqueness factor, but also testing what works and like doing what works. So always remember to test those different things because you never know what's going to just blow out of the water.
Right.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And kind of more on that point is I think like there's certain things that like you'll look at and you'd be like, oh, that's an ad. So
Yeah.
you like want to usually be careful to not do that. And it's almost about, like you said, like emulating the platform and emulating what organic content looks like on that platform so that people don't just write it off as an ad and they sit there and if either it's a video on Facebook or a written post on LinkedIn, they'll sit there and consume it because it doesn't trigger that red flag for them. So there is something about emulate the organic content of the platform, but then also what's that hook that's going to get them to read? How is that going to stand out to grab their attention?
The organic is so valuable. Like if next time you go, like next time anyone in here goes out in public, look at someone else like going through Instagram and Facebook, and just look at how they analyze. Like the human brain when they see an ad, they like it's subconscious to just scroll past it.
Yeah.
Like really analyze it in public. Either do it with yourself or analyze someone else doing it. You'll see them. They'll just go like they'll subconsciously know it's an ad and scroll right past it. But when you make it organic, that's when they don't do that subconscious slide to the next post. They go, oh, this is an organic post. I'm supposed to look at this type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when you make it organic to that platform and organic, like where it's something that they would naturally read, then they don't do that subconscious swipe. Because in advertising, it's super important to not have that subconscious swipe. You want to make it organic as possible, so that way they actually engage with it and actually look at it. Because no one likes to be sold to. Like, let's be honest, no one actually wants to be sold to. But if you make it organic and valuable to the customer, then they're actually going to look at it, and that becomes where it makes it super valuable for them.
Yeah, no one reads a newspaper for the ads.
Yeah, exactly.
And like exactly what you just said goes back to like foundational like Ogilvy or like breakthrough advertising concepts. Like these guys back in the day that would do newspaper ads and they would write articles in the newspaper as an ad would be the best performing ads because it looks like an article. Somebody reads it like an article. You're reading a newspaper, so you're reading articles. And that's what sells.
Yeah, I totally agree. And is there anything else that when it comes to you see people doing this on LinkedIn ads and they shouldn't be, or any particular best practice recommendations there, or anything else that you want to make sure you communicate that like, hey, I see this on LinkedIn ads, they need to be doing this, or is there anything else that you recommend and want to communicate about LinkedIn ads there?
I'd say putting it in context in terms of like the sales and marketing funnel, LinkedIn is an excellent channel for reaching professionals. But if we are thinking about that, the strategy that we talked about in terms of like sometimes you got to start more ebook and low level and know that these leads are going to need to be followed up with a good sales process afterwards. I think a lot of people or some people, they think about e-commerce and Facebook and just getting people to go purchase on a website by themselves and know that to be successful in B2B, you often need a good sales and marketing follow-up process in place. So with any platform, don't just rely on the ads to do all the selling for you. You're going to spend your money on all the ads. Build out your process so that you can make the most of those leads wherever they're coming from. So
we always say, do what your competitors aren't doing.
Yeah.
So if your competitors are just sitting there and letting the ad run, that's you're gonna waste your money because that's what other people are doing because it's lazier. And like when you actually are doing and changing the fastest, that's when you start seeing the most results because you have to be doing whatever your competitors aren't doing. So that's just how it works.
And maybe a couple other things while I'm thinking about it is one. You can put the LinkedIn Insight tag in your website and at least start analyzing your traffic. Who are the people that are visiting my site to start? Maybe that will give you some indicator in terms of how I would go use the targeting on LinkedIn if I'm going to run an ad campaign. And then the other tip I have is Sales Navigator is a great tool to inspect your audience. Whereas in Campaign Manager, you build audiences, but you don't really see who's in that audience. And then using Sales Navigator is a great way to go build that same audience and then see who are the actual people in this audience so that you can kind of do some reverse engineering or just at least quality check the people on this list to make sure they're the right ones you want to be reaching. So like that's a tool that I wish like every platform had, like Facebook and Google, like just to see who am I going to actually be targeting. Well, Sales Navigator is a great way to do that on LinkedIn.
Yeah, 100%. That it really is. Unfortunately, like I bet we can go on for this for like another 16 hours. But that's all we have time for today. So please, Anthony, tell them, the audience, how to find you, what your social medias are, and anything else there. So that way the audience can find you.
Sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Anthony Blatner on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me there. And then outside of there, my website's speedworksocial.com. There's a lot of good blogs and content on LinkedIn ads best practices. So if you want to learn more, you can go there. And then my email is anthony@speedworksocial.com if you want to shoot me an email.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much for hopping on. And thank you so much for all the other attendees that are watching. This is the Data Rules Podcast. Thank you for watching.